Welcome to the Closing Culture Podcast. I am your host, Sean Slaughter, real estate agent and investor. This real estate podcast goes on top of the roof, behind the wall, and under the flow to show you how real estate really works. Welcome to Closing Culture. I am your host, Sean Slaughter. And on this podcast, we talk about real estate and life because real estate is life. Let me ask you a question. Can you become a home investor and also work a 9-to-5 job? When many people think of this question, I think they imagine themselves working at their job and then all of a sudden, it's 2:30 and their tenant calls them and says, my water pipe is busted, the house is flooded, the toilet bowl is overrunning, there's a gas fire in the back. I'm sure that these are the things that may keep you from dipping your toe into property investment. But today I want to answer that question because before I became a real estate agent, I owned a job and I owned property. And so I want to kind of give you a little insight into what that's like to see if it's something that's for you. Now, one of my main reasons for owning property is for retirement. I do not own property to flip or to do some of that. Those are different strategies you can do. Some people are doing Airbnbs. What I do is I buy the property, I hold on to it for as long as possible. I allow my tenant to pay rent, which pays the mortgage on the property that I own. And my goal is for that property to be part of my retirement plan so that 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, when I want to stop working and I basically want to take money and I basically want to cash out, take that money, lived on a fixed income and travel, which is my dream, right? That is the reason, that is my property strategy. If you are interested in owning property, is why? What is your strategy? Some people own property because they want to cash flow month to month and they actually want to leave their job. Some people own property like I do for the equity. Some people own property so that they can buy it, fix it up and flip it and make a chunk of money. You have to determine why you want to own property. Why do you even want to get into this property investment thing? The other thing I want to tell you is that many people want to own property to get off of their jobs. And the reality is, you're going to need more properties than you think. Now, who am I talking to? I'm talking to the regular folks, right? I'm talking to the regular folks that go to work 9-to-5, have a salary. Maybe you're a salesman. Maybe you're an independent contractor. You have a job that supports you and supports you financially. And maybe you want to leave that job. Maybe you and you think property investment is that. Maybe you want to add some additional income. I want to help you to understand how many properties you'll actually need if you want to leave your job. For the big investors, right? The Grant Cardones. One of the reasons that these guys can not have a 9-to-5 and just rely on their properties is because of the amount of properties that they buy and the types of properties that they buy. Grant Cardone is buying huge condominiums in Miami, all right, with 30, 40, 50 tenants. And he's using that for Airbnbs and rentals and so on and so forth. And he's spending millions of dollars to acquire a single property. Many of us are not there right now. I'm not saying it's not where you want to be, but let's just be real. Many of us are not there right now. And many of you are going to be buying single family homes. Maybe the biggest thing that you'll buy is a piece of commercial property with, maybe 4, 5, 6 tenants in them, something like that. Most property investors that I know in my area that are doing very, very well do have a mix of single family homes, some small 4 units, maybe some commercial property, but, they don't have, a $30 million building that they purchased in California or Miami that people are using for a vacation. All right. So I'm talking to kind of the rest of us, not the 1 to 5%. Typically, when you purchase a home, in my experience, you're going to make a couple of $100 over what your mortgage is. That can be as low as $250. It can be as high as, $800, $1,000. It just all depends on how much you got that property for, how much that mortgage is, and how much your tenant is paying in rent. This idea that you're going to get 5 properties and quit your job, it's not going to happen. If you have 5 properties and the rent is $1,500 a month, and you realize in your area that a property like that rents out for $2,000 a month, then you're going to make $500 a month on that property. So now if you're making that $500 a month, you're not going to spend all that money. What you're going to do is you're going to take a good portion of that money and you're going to put it aside for CapEx expenditures, which is the roof, the HVAC, big things that can happen. We need to be putting aside some of that monthly money so that when these expenses happen, we're not, caught empty-handed without any money. So that leaves you with a couple $100. So let's just say you are making $500 a month and you decide to take $200, $150 and put it aside. Let's do $150. So you have $350 that you're making from that single property. If you wanted to take that $350 and you want to spend it as income, it's only bringing in an extra $4,500, between $4,000 and $5,000 a year annually. $4,000, $4,500 a year annually is not enough to replace your job. That's just one property. And if you have 4 properties, then doing the 500, right? Then you're making, between $20,000 and $25,000 a year. Again, and you still have to take a piece of that money to put it aside for your major expenses. It's still not enough money to replace your job. And if you're working at a job that you hate, that pays you, $90K, even if you get a big 5,000 square foot property and you can charge, $4,000 in rent, you're still going to have a mortgage that's $2,700, $3,000, $3,200. So still the ratio remains. Many times in order to leave our jobs and become full-time investors, you got to have 30, 40, 50 properties, to be very, very honest. And so if you're looking to leave your job to become a property investor, let's get really real about how many properties you're actually going to need. And in my opinion, it's going to take about 25, 30 properties of varying sizes and so on and so forth to get there. All right. You can do it faster if you get, a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 unit, apartment building. But then again, do you have the money for that? If you do, cool. You're still going to have to buy several of those. All right. 5 to 6 to 7 of those in order to come off your job, in order for that money to replace your income. Okay. So that's number one. What is your goal as a part-time property investor as you work your full-time job? The second thing I want you to think about, let's just say you're like me. One day, you want to buy property. You want to hold on to that property. You want it to increase in value while you pay the mortgage down. And then 10, 15, 20 years from now, you want to sell that property. You want to take that money and you want to live off a fixed income. Well, if that's your goal, what are some things you need to be aware of? The first thing you need to be aware of is that it takes money to make money. In any situation, in any business, it's going to take money to make money. Not only is it going to take some money to purchase that home, even if you get a loan, you still have to pay for closing costs, possibly a real estate agent, but then you're going to have to fix that house, all right? Unless you walk into a house that's like brand new and you got it for cheap, or the house is perfect. Sometimes you walk into houses that are in really, really good condition. Still, because you're going to have tenants, you want to make sure that you put quality materials in this house in the areas that most people are using often, your faucets, sinks, plumbing, kitchen sink, lighting. Like, you want these areas to be quality, because the reality is many people that rent things treat them worse than when they own the same thing, right? You rent a car and, you got the AC on, the windows down, you driving really fast, driving all over. Versus if you purchase that car, you're a little more gentle because you own it and you want the car to last. The rental, you just like, I'm gonna bring it back. Well, the same idea goes into rental homes. Many people do not feel like this is my home. This is somebody else's home that I'm paying to rent. And so they really don't get homey, right? Like real comfortable and real homey and real comfortable into that house and make that house a home, because there's always like this thing in their back of their mind that this is somebody else's house and I'm just paying rent, right? They always have that idea that I got to pay rent to my landlord. I got to pay rent to my landlord. That idea will translate into them treating the house rougher than if they owned it. Do you have the money to make sure that you have quality materials in there? Do you have the money to fix the house up if it needs a lot of fixing? Do you have the money to make repairs when things break? This is probably one of the most crucial things when it comes to investing in a home is, do you have the money to do that? Your job may make a lot of money, and that's wonderful. And you may have all your bills covered and your health insurance and all other type of stuff. But are you going to make enough money from the home, in addition maybe to a little bit of money that you're getting from your job, to put away just in case things happen? The second thing I want you to think about is tenants. Are you the type of person that has enough patience to deal with your tenants? Because sometimes you'll get great tenants, and sometimes you get the tenants from hell. And you're going to have to be able to work with your tenants. All right. See, you can't be a slumlord and be somebody that does not care about your tenants, does not, at least address their requests or answer questions, and you want to be absent, because the whole idea is this: if I take care of my tenants will pay on time. Because the last thing that anybody who is renting properties wants to happen is to have to constantly replace tenants. Because when you constantly replace tenants, it costs so much money, right? You may have to repaint, you have to clean, you may have to address things that they broke. Versus if they're living in that house and they write on the walls and they break a light bulb or something like that, they living with it. So you don't want high turnover. I've read different articles. I remember this one landlord in DC that I read about, and he talks about with his tenants, he rents only to Section 8 tenants. And I really kind of respected what he did. He rents only to Section 8 tenants, but he creates his apartments to look like palaces. All the materials that you may find in a $500,000 home, some of the stone and the tile and just those different things where you look at a home and you're like, okay, there's quality trimming, and he actually puts those in his apartment. All right. And he does stuff like for his tenants, he'll drop them off like little Christmas gifts and things like that. Now, mind you, this guy owns a couple of apartment buildings. All right. But he like renovates these apartments to look incredible, and he treats his tenants very well. It does not mean that he's a pushover. His interviewing process is crazy because he's looking for the right type of person, because he knows how he's going to treat them. And he wants the right type of person that's going to feel gratitude for that treatment and therefore take care of the place. I like that type of landlord. I like that type of relationship with a tenant. It's not fuzzy and warm, because I have tenants in my rentals and I don't really talk to them much. The only time you really hear from them is if there is, some kind of fix that needs to be done. But I do like the idea of, if you take care of your tenants, you want to have a tenant live in that place for 10 years. You don't want to have in 10 years 8 different tenants. It's just going to cost you too much money. Do you have the patience? Do you have the personality? Do you have the people skills to have a property and not be a slumlord, but be a really good landlord that takes care of their tenants so that their tenants will want to remain there year after year after year? Thirdly, who's going to manage the property? I like using property managers. I was working a 9 to 5, teaching in school, and I owned 2 properties. I had no issues. I didn't get calls at work. I didn't get so on and so forth. My property manager has this really cool portal that he uses for tenants so that if they need to request repairs or they have certain issues, they can put their requests in that portal. I'll get a notification that they've made a request to, let's say, fix the sink. What my property manager will do is call them, assess the situation, reach out to contractors, and then call me and say, hey, here's what we found. Here's what it's going to cost. Here are 2 or 3 quotes. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful thing. You will have to pay 10% is typically the going rate for a property manager, 10% of your monthly income. But it is 1,000% worth it. If you choose to manage your own properties while working a 9 to 5, beware. Because now you're really taking on a second job as a property manager. You're already a property investor, right? That's just the acquiring and renovating of the property. You're already a landlord, right? You're collecting the money, but do you want to be a landlord and a maintenance man? Do you want to be the one doing the phone calls to the maintenance men or women? Or do you want to run a property manager? My property manager does everything. They do the interviewing. They'll do a pre-home inspection. Some of those things cost additional, but again, my property manager, their goal is to make sure that my investment is in the best shape possible. That's another thing. You want to hire not the cheapest property manager. You want to hire a really good one, because a cheap property manager will just, maybe they'll do the interviews. Maybe they'll get Uncle Bobo to go fix something. But all they're really doing is they're approaching the job as, oh, you can't do it. I'll just do this for you. I'm not looking for that type of person. I'm looking for the property manager that says, we understand that this is an asset, an investment, and we want to make sure that this asset continues to grow with minimal damage as possible. So we're going to do inspections. We're going to do really, really rigorous interviews. We're going to have different processes when it comes to collecting money and insurances and all this other type of stuff. Make sure you get a really good property manager. And lastly, do you have the mental wherewithal to deal with the complexities of owning a property or multi-properties? Last year, I got a call and toilets was getting backed up. Tub was getting backed up. You already know what that means. Something going on with that sewage, that waistline, right? Come to find out, it's all blocked up. It was cast iron, tree roots going through there. $5,000 just like that. Had to dig the yard up, replace it. Now it's a much needed repair. I needed to get rid of that cast iron, out of that waistline anyway, and replace it with PVC. But are you willing to deal with some of those complexities that come up? Had another issue where had a repairman go and install a gas stove and didn't do the best job, which is why I don't use them anymore. And my tenant felt like they smelled gas. And so they called the city. The city came, and basically the connection to the gas stove was done improperly. Thank God, nothing happened to the tenant and so on and so forth. But these are some of the complexities. What about tenants that don't want to leave? What about tenants that don't want to pay rent? I had to go through that as well. A tenant that didn't want to pay rent. And we had to go through the process of taking this tenant to court and, kicking him out the home. That is such a hassle. It is an absolute hassle. And of course, you see on like social media with some of these cities like New York City, where, some of these squatters can squat in a home, and to get them out the home, you think that you could just be like, this is my house. They got to get out. No, there's a whole process you got to go through it, right? But here's the thing that I say. No matter what business you get into, you're going to have to deal with issues that business presents that suck, are unfair, don't make sense, whatever. As a property investor, are you willing to get into this business and be okay with those issues? There's a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F, right? And I really like the book because it talked about if you're able to choose your problems, then you never really feel like you have problems. Here's what I mean. As a teacher, I already understood some of the problems that come with teaching, right? And God bless every teacher out there. All right. These are like really national heroes when you walk into a school as a teacher and don't know if you're going to get a mass shooting that day, right? Or you're raising somebody's kids. I can go on and on for teaching. So I have a really soft spot in my heart for teachers. But I understood that there were going to be behavior issues with the kids. I understood that kids are going to come from backgrounds that may be difficult and come to school hungry. I understood that sometimes schools focus more on test scores and attendance and data. And so sometimes they let kids come back into the school that shouldn't come back into the school, or they deal with kids in a way that enables them versus helps them. I even understood the salary that I was getting paid was not going to be the greatest. But at that time of my life, I needed a job. I worked with kids a lot prior to that with a business that I did with music mentoring. And I love working with kids, love working with teens. And so I was willing to do those things and endure those things. And so it really didn't, was it annoying? Sure, but I understood the problems I was going into. So I complained a lot less than my colleague because some of the problems that were presented, they didn't want to deal with. All right. Now, I would have been pissed and upset if I'm at a job that I don't want to deal with any of these problems, but I got to deal with them every single day. So you get to choose in life. You don't get to run away from problems and you don't get to neglect problems, but you get to choose some of the problems because some of the problems are just forced upon you, right? But you get to choose most of the problems that you have in life, right? If you want to get into property investing, understand the issues, understand the problems. And if you say, I'm okay with that, I have the temperament for that, I have the mindset for that, it's going to be wonderful for you. And let's be honest, because we're doing this for retirement, you don't have to have 30 properties, right? If you have 5, 10 homes, each home, you bought, 200, 250 maybe, and the homes go up to be valued at 350, 400, 500,000 or over a period of time. And you can cash out, 250, 300,000 out of a home. Imagine cashing $250,000 out of a home and you own 10 of them. You just cashed out $2.5 million. Of course, you got to pay your taxes, right? That's a whole other thing, right? That capital gains tax. But there's some different ways, some different things you can do with that to safeguard your money. But that's not the point of this conversation. But 10 homes and you cash out $250,000, you just cashed out $2.5 million, and minus taxes, you can put that into your retirement portfolio that you should already be accruing maybe at your job if you're, matching 401ks and all this type of stuff. And then you can live on a fixed income for the next 30 years. Hopefully this helps and answer some questions for those who are working a 9-to-5 and just interested in property investment. If you have any questions about that, go on social. I'm pretty active on IG a lot, but I'm on all platforms at Sean Slaughter Homes. DM me, hit me up with your question, and I will be more than happy to answer it. That's it for Closing Culture. My name is Sean Slaughter. Be good to yourself and to somebody else. Peace.